Hello, everyone. I am here with Tom Leichardt. Tom is a professor of medical Qigong and a practitioner of healing arts. You'll see his URL in the comment section. Tom, welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
It's so great. Tom, you deal with a lot of people in your work as a practitioner of medical Qigong. They're coming to you for healing, but you also train people in medical Qigong arts so that they are, in a sense, trainers in healing. So, what would you say is when we talk about healing journeys or, why people would come to get Qigong treatment? What do you see in terms of patterns? It just the suffering for one. What else do you see when people come in?
Well, one way I like to look at it, kind of a simplified overview way, is all pain is resistance to the natural self, right? And it's not just alleviating pain and alleviating suffering in that way, but it's how can we rearrange our life so that the energy flows through us and doesn't get blocked up and create pain, right? In Chinese medicine, we say, where there is free flow, there is no pain, and where there is pain, there is lack of free flow, right? That's ancient Chinese wisdom. And so the idea is how do we unlock people to restore that free flow of energy? And it's not just physical, right? Of course, we work on the channels, stretch the channels, open things up, but it's also energetic, it's also mental, it's also psychological, emotional, and spiritual. So how do we maximize that amount of flow so that a person's really grounding their energy in physical reality and not getting blocked up and just restoring that sense of free flow, right? So it's emotional pain, right? It's physical pain. It's all of the above, right? It's how do we unlock people so they can really engage more fully in their life.
Yeah, and the Society for the Study of Pain, which is an academic organization, defines pain on two levels. It's defined as both physical and mental, emotional, psychological. And so to really be able to treat a person, you really want to get everything. So we talked about, you and I talk a lot about symptom abatement and just like, oh, make the pain go away and, help me walk again or help me get my life back. And, those are all legitimate concerns. But then you're talking about something else where this becomes spirit work. Can you talk a little bit about what spirit work is?
Well, the way to get into this is to just to understand that pain is a signal. It's a message. It's a message from different levels of the self and even from the physical body that something's out of alignment, right? And so we take the message and we want to listen to it, right? We don't necessarily want to cover it up with medications, right? Unless, of course, if a person's suffering, well, yes, let's get people out of suffering, let's get people out of pain, but let's go further and let's look at like what is that pain an indication of? There's a misalignment somewhere in the body. The body's attempting to communicate, the psyche's attempting to communicate. And so we want to, not only just relieve the pain, but we want to be able to use it, right? Common example is, if you stick your hand in the fire, you want to feel pain so that you remove your hand from the fire, right? And likewise, if you take medications and say, I just want to numb this out, I want to be able to stick my hand in the fire and not feel any pain. Well, you can do a lot of damage, right? So the idea
Yeah,
is
you might
use
lose your hand.
exactly. And I know that's a very raw example, but that's the idea is how do we use this so that we can take corrective measures and use it as an indicator, right? When you're driving on the road and you start hitting those little bumps, you want to correct yourself and bring yourself back into alignment so you're in the center of the road in your lane, right? Same thing, pain is there to show us, okay, something's not right in the body. We want to use that, right? And not just cover it up, but we want to use it and get ourselves back into alignment.
Yeah, and that's a different way to look at pain, right? So pain, for example, and I work with a lot of people in pain, is its usefulness, right? Because we think it's a bother, it's a hindrance, it's something that has to be put up with. But to change that and say this could be useful, consider the possibility that this could be useful. That's kind of different. Like, wow, we're starting to get into meaning about pain.
Yeah, it's like
Would you say?
we're learning to use it as an indicator. It's useful information, right? There are no accidents. I mean, if you study medicine at any level, you realize the human body is a miracle, right? It's a wondrous synchronous miracle, and so everything the body does, you want to use that as a sign of something that's happening. And that's where holistic medicine really shines, is we use everything as an indication and a sign of what's going on at deeper levels of the self. So everything is useful, everything is information, and it's changing our relationship to pain that begins to alleviate the suffering, right? There was once a master that said, pain can be a part of life, but suffering is optional, right? So I really love that.
Yes, and you said something that really sparks my attention about listening, and how sometimes the practices become ways of listening. And can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite practices for listening?
Well, first of all, is just becoming present in the moment, right? Take a condition like insomnia, for example, right? People usually are very troubled by this, right? And I was one of those people that actually had the quote unquote insomnia, but I've actually learned to use it in this incredible, powerful, and beautiful way, is that I would just lay in Shavasana, right? And I would start really working and dropping into my channel system. And I'd be able to start actually doing Qigong, just laying in Shavasana, at 3 in the morning, and focusing on different points in my feet, bringing the chi down, starting to understand what's going on in my body, like, oh, the liver feels a little hot, bringing awareness and, oh, there's something in my lungs, right? A sense of heaviness in the chest, that kind of stuff. Just getting really in tune with the body and in tune with these messages that were helping me to process through different aspects of my life. And now these sessions, if I have broken sleep, it doesn't matter, because I'm always using it in this incredible, rich, transformative way. And those are some of my deepest meditations, right? So that's using it in a positive way instead of being like in resistance about it. Oh,
Yeah.
I find myself, I'm tired in the morning if I've been fighting myself, but if I use these moments of being awake in the middle of the night for transformation and healing, then I wake up refreshed, right? If I go into a deep meditative state with it, it's just a part of the experience. So it's learning, it's whatever life gives you, learning to use that in a positive way. That's really where the transformation is.
Yeah, and it could be really simple, right? You're talking about, oh, okay, life handing you lemons, and you make that lemonade. And so you and I've talked about this before, about what are your signs of transformation? Signs that things are happening, healing is happening, or maybe the pain going down. It could be one of the many signs that the change and transformation is happening, like you said, in a really deep level. And it's just a favorite topic. Can you say more about that?
Sure, and usually this kind of it splits into like two sides of the coin, shall we say, right? It's all one, but there's two sides of the coin. And one is the so-called positive indicators, or the ones we have a tendency to label in positive ways, right? So yeah, of course, reduction of pain, there's more free flow, there's less resistance in your life, right? You're not resisting the pain, you're using it, right? And then you're able to create that sense of free flow, even psychologically, emotionally as well. Instead of pushing against things, you're flowing with things. Synchronicities start showing up, and you start
Mm.
seeing this kind of magical arrangement of life. You're in the flow, as we like to say, like you're riding that surfboard, right? And you're just feeling this flow, and that life supports you. Life is that wave that you're riding upon, and you're just in balance with it, right? These are the signs of transformation, right? Things are just more of a flow, less of an effort. In Taoist tradition, sometimes we say effortless effort, right? Because you're focused, you're taking action, but it's not an effort anymore. It's not work. It's not hard work. It's a flow. And you're just in this incredible state of flow, and you don't even notice the passage of time, right? It's not like, oh, I worked 8 hours and I feel dead, exhausted because I've been in resistance all day. It's like, I've been doing this passionate project, and I feel great, right? And yeah, I might feel tired, but I feel at peace, right?
Yes, like a good tired, right? So
Yeah,
just to recap a little bit, you know, the important point that I want to make sure that we absolutely underscore, because you talked about resistance as is one of the things that brings us to healing work, and especially um, some kind of resistance to pain or symptoms or whatever. And one of the things that you talked about was acceptance, right? Accepting that and not resisting. So just like, okay, I'm awake at 3 a.m., like your great example. And then that becomes this opportunity to flow. And that's like, okay, now that's a sign that healing actually is happening.
yes, it's when we no longer resist life, but use what life gives us. That is definitely a sign, right? And there's other signs, right? Like someone says something that used to be a trigger, and you might still feel some of those negative emotions coming up, but then you realize, wait a minute, I have space here. I can choose
Mm.
something else. I don't have to say something in response out of more, actually, I should say more out of reaction, right? Out of anger, out of frustration, out of feeling hurt, abandoned, rejection, betrayal, these different
The
aspects, right?
list.
You kind of see through it and you're like, wait a minute, let's pause here.
Mm.
Maybe this person is not, maybe I'm hearing something and they're saying something else. Maybe there's a disconnect here, right? And
Mm.
then it turns out, oh, that person, they were totally meaning something else. They were not blowing me off. They were not, abandoning me, right? It's you start growing out of these old habituated reactions, and you go more into response, and you have that pause. That's another sign of transformation, is you
Yeah,
can pause before
less
you act.
reactivity.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then you mentioned something else that I love. It's a synchronicity. Synchronicity is happening, or just that noticing like these coincidences, noticing, hey, I was thinking about that too. Or, that one where you're thinking about somebody and then they send you a text, right? Or, that something comes up on your YouTube feed, and that starts to create this feeling of, and this is something I know you have experience with. It's like that living, like what is living, like being in the flow. What does that feel like? What are the signs of being in the flow besides synchronicity?
It's very magical, right? It's the sense of, like, I use the example of the surfer because that wave, that momentum of life is carrying you, right? The structure of existence supports you. This is something, we learn in Qigong as well. When we stand in the Wuji, the structure, your physical structure supports you, and it's not an effort. You sink into it, you relax into it, right? And it's the same thing with life, and that's why Qigong is such a metaphor for life, is you're riding on the structure of existence. And yes, you take action and you very much ground the energy through action, but it's not hard work, it's not effort, it's joyful, ecstatic action. And you produce a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work, right? It feels like just this amazing flow, and it's exciting, and it's like you're full of energy for it, right? So it's very different. It's like work to me is like, it implies there's a resistance there, like I'm pushing something against resistance. But synchronicity and being on that surfboard, it's like you're just gliding with the flow of life, and you produce a lot of work, you produce a lot of effect, but it doesn't feel like effort, right? It's a very different state to approach life from.
Yeah, sounds like play.
Yeah, exactly. And same in
Right.
Qigong, you're standing in the Wuji, or you're doing these postures. And if you're having a lot of resistance and you're all tight, oh, you're going to be tired and you're going to have aches and pains in the body, right? But as soon as you start relaxing and dropping into that structure, you can hold this posture for an hour and feel great afterwards, right? And you're just being in this resonant state of your structure supporting you. And it's almost like the physiology is a metaphor for the experience of life, right? The structure of existence does support you, right? If you allow it to support you.
Yeah, and a lot of our practices, a lot of the Qigong practices are the exploration of those very natural things about the body, right? Just breathing, right? Just
Hmm.
relaxation, sense of space. That's all so natural. That's just like part of, like you said, it's our structure. That's how we're built. That's our design.
It's our first nature, right?
It's our first
We're
nature. Just like
uncovering
hang
what
out
we've
there.
forgotten, right?
Yeah. So you and I talked about a lot about preparation for doing this work, right? Because it's certainly like, oh yeah, it's a great idea, but how do we prepare?
Well, I mean, to me, it's really I'm drawn to it because it's a passion of mine, and so I mean, I don't know how much the work preparation is the work itself, right?
Right.
It's kind of a it's a challenging question because I'm like, you just drop into it, you know. And yes, then, as you begin on the path, you just start learning things. As soon as you engage, synchronicities start lining up and, the teachings unfold, right? But you have to engage with it, right? So the preparation really is taking that first step. We say the 1,000-mile journey begins with the ground that you're standing on, right? So you begin where you are, right? So it's almost like one way of looking at it is the preparation is really just initiating and beginning the journey. And then everything starts to flow. As soon as you engage with existence, existence engages back with you, right?
That's
And
that's a beautiful way to put it.
I wanted to kind of circle back because I mentioned, one side of the coin of
Yes, I wanted you to
transformation,
circle back too, because it's like, oh yeah, wait a minute, we want to get to that other side of the coin. That's
right?
right.
So the other side of the coin is, you might call it negative synchronicity for lack of better words, right? And it's as you start expanding yourself, you're growing in consciousness, more of your natural energy is flowing. It starts to expand, and as it expands, it starts to stretch on your personality a little bit. It starts to stretch on your whole channel matrix and your energy system a little bit, and you start feeling this sense of resistance, right? It's another form of resistance because you might have had unconscious negative beliefs before, things in your personality that were kind of in the background, but now as more energy flows through you, as you're starting to expand, it starts to stretch you a little bit, right? And then you start noticing things like, oh, now I'm getting triggered more. Oh, now I'm feeling anger, right? And now I'm feeling this and that, and things are starting to feel tight. Well, it's kind of like the snake that's getting ready to shed its skin, right? There's this discomforts, right? It starts feeling like I'm not comfortable in my skin anymore, like because you're ready to transform some of these limiting patterns that previously you were quite content with because nothing was stretching, right? So now that you're growing, there's a little bit of those phases of that sense of discomfort. I'm peeling a layer, right? And it's so exhilarating to peel that layer off, but it's like you can't transform what you don't own, right? So it must be brought to your awareness, and then you can transform it in consciousness, right? Otherwise, it stays unconscious, and how do you work with it, right? So it's part of the journey as well. And it's not an interruption in the flow, it is the flow taking you to these places in your personality that are ready for transformation, that are still a little bit in the darkness, right? And we're bringing light into those areas, turning the light on in the closet and in the basement and in the attic, right? And just seeing what's there for transformation.
Yeah, and sometimes we might not want to see what's there. We're not ready to see what's there. We find, whoa, there's something in that basement. But what I really appreciate about what you're saying is definitely that, like, how do you engage? Well, make that decision to engage. Have that willingness, that little curiosity inside, but then also trust that when you encounter something negative, something like, oh, suddenly pissing you off that maybe didn't, right,
Yeah.
that you weren't aware of before, that actually could be a good sign that you are engaged, that you are in coming up against your issues or the truth
Yes.
or
Yeah.
things in your life that could be looked at, so that
Absolutely.
becomes positive, and it goes back to what you said at the beginning of, it's, you can work with it. You can work with the tension in the body, but also you can work with this stuff that's happening in your mind. Yeah. And that's like beautiful. That's like the non-resistance to even just like your own emotions, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
No,
wonderful.
triggers are really golden. They're golden portals and opportunities for transformation. Now, in our culture, we're so trained to gloss it over. We're trained to ignore it, sweep it under the rug. Oh, just think positive thoughts, But you actually want to explore that. If something within you is negative, it's like you have to metabolize the emotion by experiencing it fully and getting down to what beliefs are generating that, right? What do I believe is true here? What am I buying into? Right? Because oftentimes these beliefs present themselves as reality, but you realize these are just ideas and beliefs and definitions about reality that oftentimes are completely false, completely untrue. And this bears itself out as you slow down in consciousness and ask yourself, what am I buying into? What am I believing is true here? And is that really happening? Or is this just a preconditioned response or reaction, I should say, right? Because I think something's happening that isn't even happening, right? So
Huh.
yeah, slowing that down and asking those
Yeah, and then
questions.
that becomes that reprocessing,
Yes,
right? The
exactly. Right.
reprocessing, and literally it's going to be changing your brain and literally changing your body, changing how you interact, how you are in the world. This
Absolutely.
is yeah, it's like, and I love what you said about these triggers are golden. These are your opportunities. This is your life right here that you're looking at. And it's really powerful, but then it's just beautiful in terms of reframing the negative, reframing the stuff that we don't want to talk about.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Because if you have these knee-jerk reactions, well, you can just say, oh, that's the way I am. You can say, I have no control over that. You can say, oh, my partner made me do it. The traffic jam made me do it. Well, you can deflect blame all you want, but the only person in charge of your own sovereignty is you, right? And granted, it doesn't excuse other people's behavior, but I still have the chance to respond in more life affirming, positive ways, even if it means extricating myself from a situation, right? That's a valid choice sometimes.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, can I do it in positivity? Can I do it in love versus, oh, I hate you and let me get back at you, and just perpetuating the cycle of disconnection, fragmentation, compartmentalization, and, me versus them kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. It makes me take a breath like, whoa, so it's like this work is really serious. And you and I've talked about before about making sure that we're doing it at a pace that feels right for us. Right. That pace allows a little bit of flow, but also allows that hard work also. They could be, okay, we're encountering something that's important, in our lives, and that we can actually work with. Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's being present, and like you said earlier, it's about showing up, showing up to be present and to work with the stuff of consciousness, and without resistance, accepting what's there, right? Once something's happening, why not have a belief that whatever is happening is already part of the grand orchestration of life, and it's up to us to discover, the mystery of how can I use this in a positive way, right? Instead of going into resistance and saying, this should not be happening. It's happening,
Right.
right? It's like,
It's happening.
let's just, why not just trust the process and use it instead of resisting it, right? Because it's already happening, then the resistance you see is it's nonsensical, right? How is that serving you? How is that serving me? Anybody, right?
And then we can look at other things that I know you and I are big fans of, noticing process, and
Mm-hmm.
just noticing, oh, look at that, look what's happening there, and then that just creates a little more space. And I want to go back to what we talked about, play, because what you call, qigong uh, practitioner is also known as a player. You play qigong the way you would play music. You play tai chi the way you would play music, or the way you would make art. And that goes back to things we did very naturally as children. Can you speak more about that and just kind of engaging the child?
Yeah, and we spoke earlier, right, about the states of wonderment, the state
Yes.
of play. So, on one hand, it can be kind of easy to say, oh, this is serious work, but it's actually very non-serious, right? It's actually it's a play, and that's the whole thing is, when you're riding that surfboard, if you get too serious, you get tense, you wipe out, right? And so the thing is, you got to stay playful, you got to stay fluid, you got to stay flexible, open, and a state of wonderment, right? Even asking the question, how can this serve me, right? Negative events are unfolding. Well, how can I use this in a positive way? How can this serve me, right? Just taking a more, just being open, curious, right? Curious is a powerful state, because instead of having a preconceived assumption about something, you're curious, like, wow, look at that. Something I wanted to happen isn't happening, right? Maybe it's an arrow pointing in another direction. Maybe the timing isn't there yet, right? Maybe it's not time yet. Maybe something else needs to happen first. Maybe there's a lesson here. Maybe this is just to get me to relax and trust the flow and not be so rigid and controlling in the mind, right? But to surrender to something much bigger. So just having that curiosity and a state of wonderment, right? Children can stare at a dandelion for half an hour, and just be in an utter state of awe, of wonderment, and just being, just grokking existence, right? And a lot of these states, these deep Qigong states and meditation states, and even just, living your life, that dropping into that state of wonder, seeing that sunset, watching that hummingbird, just seeing something simple and beautiful and pausing and being in a state of wonder. Like, that's a beautiful state to cultivate.
Yeah, and that's just a lot of that, the naturalness of that state, right? Just being the child, or noticing details, and it's like an ordinary awe, just looking out your window or doing something like that. But I'm glad you mentioned the word awe, because it's a very complex emotion that has been studied actually recently in the last 15 years. And Dr. Keltner in UC Berkeley has gone to great lengths, along with Jonathan Haidt, to define awe. And in the last 10 years, there's been just incredible research coming on, from awe. And one of the things I wanted to point out is what the researchers are finding is that awe sets you up mentally for just something more, right? So there's a characteristic of awe that requires accommodation, that makes you say, "Hey, what is really going on?" and gets you into that wonderment, like that you were talking about. Like, hey, you need to understand something. So awe is good for you cognitively. So just as children, that's a very useful thing, right? To learn how to think, to understand the world, to understand yourself. And I really, really love that topic, because what's also found in the research, right? And we know this also just from experience, is that go back to that coin, the other side of the coin, of how you can experience awe from negative situations. And I know you have a couple stories about that. Do you want to share experiencing awe, that mind expanding emotion, during kind of like, wow, kind of negative, right? Like, for example, I'll just give you like the real common one is natural disaster. When you notice, the rubble after the hurricane, after the storm, and you just go, wow, oh my goodness, right? It's just a disaster, but then there's something going on with your mind. You're experiencing awe about, how can this happen? What does this mean? Right? The whole thing. So can you talk about just like ordinary negative awe experiences that you had?
Sure. I mean, and I think the process involved here is some kind of a natural disaster, or, a near miss accident perhaps, or even a full-blown accident, right? It renders the physical mind powerless, right? It's like something's happening beyond what the physical mind can control, and then you just drop into presence, right? That's all you have, right? You can't, it's like the physical mind just kind of stops, right? And so, like, for example, like when I lost control of my car, this is many years ago, and I could just feel myself dropping into the dantian and just feeling my energy just go straight towards earth, and just like doing, all these seemingly automatic motions for regaining control, right? And you just, it's like everything just pauses, right? The mind stream pauses. Maybe you're thinking about, you know, whatever you talked about, you know, what you're going to have for dinner or how late you are, this and that, and all of a sudden all that stops and you're just in that moment, right? Regaining control of the car, or, you know, experiencing a natural disaster or something's happening and your physical mind just, you know, what's important here, right? Like that argument you had with Sally is irrelevant, right? It's like it's non-existent because you're fully present and fully in this moment, right? So I think crisis moments, natural disasters, they are definitely portals into this state of consciousness that we're talking about, and it is a state of awe, right? And we can feel that pause of the mind stream, and experience the moment very, very directly.
Yeah, directly, vividly. And then it's just like, hey, you're right in the middle of life. You're right in the middle of existence. And there was there's a great phrase that I ran into this over the years, right? Like, oh, you're seeing being, right? You are like right there, the witness, the experiencer, everything is all together. Wow, it's just like complete, that way. So yeah, that is just so awesome, Tom. I just love that that you've thought about these things, that you can reframe that whole, like a car accident, something like a near miss or something happening in the moment. Um, this is kind of a key, like you said, it's a portal, right? Just like whatever's happening to you can be that opportunity, to practice, especially if it is negative, right? It's like a golden opportunity. I think you said it was a golden opportunity.
Yeah, golden
Yeah,
portal
that's
to
fantastic.
discover
Yeah,
more. Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah. So, any closing remarks? It feels like we've kind of run the gamut here of looking at healing as spirit work, looking for signs of transformation, taking our time in being in the experience and pacing it correctly, the synchronicities that, anything else you want to add to this rich conversation?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, it's really developing the knack to use everything in a positive way, you know, pausing and asking, how can this serve me? Because once something is happening, it's already the case. And, you know, it's like realizing that resistance is futile in that moment. It's like you have to be with it. You really have to get with that moment, whatever it is. And there's also a trust, right? Trust that your life unfolds in beautiful synchronous ways, and that things pop up as challenges because we came here to be challenged, right? As souls, as spirits. And so challenges will come, right? That's a part of life. What we can own is how we respond to that. We can react in resistance and say, no, 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 but it's happening anyway, right? Or we can use it in a positive way. And granted, sometimes that means like training the boundaries and saying no in a firm way, or extricating yourself from a situation, of course. None of this excuses, you know, negative behavior of others, but it's how do you respond to it, because it's already the case. It's already happening. And how do you respond instead of just react and perpetuate more negativity, right? So it's really serves us to have that state of awe and curiosity versus those preconceived notions of what should and should not be happening, right? Because who cares what that judgment is, right? Because it's already happened, it's already the case, right? So resistance just, it doesn't make sense, right? It becomes nonsensical when you really start to slow things down. So I think that's maybe, but that is my main message, is use everything that happens for transformation, for growth, right?
That's wonderful. And then even like the resistance,
Even the
which can, like,
resistance.
yeah, like, because you said like at the beginning, and I loved this, is that the resistance can show up as pain or distress or something, even our own psychology, our own energy can have a sense of blocking what's happening, resisting, and then that becomes tension,
Right.
right? And then that becomes more pain, and then that becomes, just like, oh, you could see it happening, but then there's nothing wrong with that. Just like, hey, you can
Exactly.
work with that too.
Because if you label it as wrong, then now you're resisting the resistance.
Ooh,
right?
whoa.
And you see how tied up in knots we can get because, if you beat yourself up for being in resistance, now you're just adding more negativity to the negativity, and it just compounds, right? So we have to practice self-love and self-kindness and accept that if we are in resistance, accept it, right? It is the case, and how can I work with this resistance in a positive way, right? Rather than just heaping more negativity on ourselves for being in resistance in the first place, right? So even that, how we treat ourselves, right? It's like we are the way we are, and it's already the case. So why kick ourselves while we're down, right? Like why not use that as fuel for growth and consciousness, and begin to understand the resistance instead of resisting it, right?
Yes, beautiful. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Tom. This has been incredible just to talk with you about this and to get your take and to hear your stories about this. And I think it's going to help a lot of people.
I hope
Thanks so
so.
much, Tom.
Yeah.